RevopsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevopsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevopsAF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
Hello, everyone. I am Matthew Valm, co-host for RevopsAF, and today I am with Anil Somaney, who is the worldwide head of revenue operations over at Island. Anil, thank you very much, my friend, for joining us today, and we're going to be talking all about the go-to-market flywheel. And Anil is, I'll say, self-described flywheel executive. So we've got the expert here to talk about that. But before we get into everything flywheel related, just tell us a little bit more about yourself, Anil, and give us a lowdown on Island as well, the company, and how the RevOps team is structured there to kind of help us set the stage.
Yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm really excited for the conversation today. So, by way of background, started hardcore finance role way back when, and then migrated over to sales ops and actually ended up running some sales organizations as well. And so, the difference between those, I was able to, going back and forth, I was able to see like how I could be impactful in an operations role to the sales team and vice versa. If I'm on the sales side, how I could help articulate the challenges and problems that we face to help the ops team be more pointed and prescriptive about what they fixed. And so most of my career was spent at AT&T bouncing back and forth between sales and operations. And then I found this spot in the middle, which was sales ops, RevOps. I ran BD teams for a little bit, but I've worked for companies, Cloudflare, Splunk, and I'm now over at Island. And at Island, we've got a pretty small RevOps team. We're small but mighty. We're in the process, Island, we're a smaller company that's growing pretty quickly. And so one of the unique challenges that we have is like implementing process and scalability with rapid growth just happening at the same time. And so the part that's really fun is trying to figure out how you put in that to scale the levers without hindering growth.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your background spans a bunch of different industries and kind of areas. You mentioned finance and your background. We share that as well. I call myself a recovering accountant because I used to be in public accounting and then moved into finance. But you've held roles at AT&T. You mentioned Splunk. You've been at companies that have been acquired by private equity. You've even worked on the investment management side of investment management companies, Cloudflare, Pluralsight, ChargeBee, now on to Island. And so, you've seen, I guess, over that tenure, right, you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of things that work. You've seen a lot of things that don't work. And I think the notion of the flywheel, I'll say, isn't necessarily like not a brand new concept, but I think it's something that I don't know if a whole lot of people have necessarily figured this out. So I guess before we dive into the things that work and some of those challenges and things that you've overcome there, is let's just define what a flywheel is. Like, what is a revenue flywheel in your own words?
Yeah, I would say it's no different than an engineering flywheel, right? Like if you think about the big wheels and the pulleys and the levers and the knobs and the switches that all go into that, it's the exact same. You can relate it back to a revenue or go-to-market flywheel. And the way that I've thought about that is like every one of those pulleys and levers are things that you can tweak along to go to market, whether it's the old people process tools analogy for ops, whether it's organizational structure, whether it's automation, AI, any of those kind of things will help that revenue flywheel. Now, the core goal of that flywheel is you obviously input, whether it's energy, whether it's money, people, any of that kind of stuff, and it spins along so as such to deliver an outsized impact, right? You put in $1, you get in $7 back. And then how do you maximize that is really the core concept behind it.
Yeah. And so based on your experiences at a variety of different companies in a variety of different spaces, these companies have also been at different stages and different sizes of their journey. Does the notion of this flywheel, at least as a starting point, when you go into these companies, right, because you've now seen them at a bunch of different sizes, stages, and verticals, is your starting point always the same in terms of the way that you approach defining what this looks like at the current company and figuring out what those levers are, or is it different based on, again, the size, the stage, the vertical, the industry that the company might be in?
Yeah, the core concept of starting is pretty much the same, right? If you think about mapping out all of the flows, how a lead becomes an opportunity and gets into the system, and how it's enriched, how it's handed off to a BDR, SDR, what messaging do they use, how many times do they call, how often, that kind of process is always the same. Where it is different is the maturity of the current company against those processes. So, like early on, what I like to do is just develop that high level, just architecture and what it looks like. And that's more documenting as it sits today and asking questions about each one of those pieces, and then measuring where we're at against those and the impact that each one of those, if done perfectly, could have.
Yeah. So you mentioned documenting kind of current state and then evaluating where you might have gaps or the most opportunity. Where, I guess, if you look at your experience again at a variety of different companies, sizes, stages, what are the most common areas or the pulleys, right, that you've seen maybe overlap in at different companies, or maybe not, maybe it's different at every one, but take us through maybe one at a time. Like, what are some of the most common or frequent kind of pulleys, levers that you see then in areas of opportunity?
You're talking about in terms of leverage points or different
Yeah,
ways?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think, first is systems and tools and automation, right? So really ensuring a data source and just data that flows through the system in a consistent way, and making sure that along the way that it's appended, it's enriched, it's enhanced, and it's the same information flowing through. That's one that's pretty easy. I think about organizational structure. Many times, or companies have BDRs, SDRs rolling into marketing. Sometimes they roll into sales. Sometimes they work individually for the AE. Sometimes they're separate within sales. And so, like, organizational structure can also have a big impact on the output of that flywheel. There's so many different messaging, ICPs, personas. The ability to tweak each one of these levers is really high, right? And there's so many different levers through there. What is always interesting to me is the opposite, is where the friction points are. And if you think about, one of the biggest ones I've seen is like silos across marketing, and then one in sales and one in CS. And then you get this whole operations layer that is telling everyone to go do something differently. Like, it's, to me, that's the biggest challenge I've found, is like, how do you pull above the individual departmental goals and objectives and develop a flywheel that is all thinking about the same metrics and the same KPIs?
So how do you, because I think a lot of people have seen that, experience that challenge. So how do you fix it? Does it come down to reconfiguring or adjusting the teams and the structure that you have? Do you do something else? What do you do to solve for that problem?
Yeah, I generally don't like to suggest a reconfiguration of the teams. That's highly disruptive. And so one of
Yeah.
the core concepts of the flywheel is small tweaks that deliver the outsized impacts. So there are a couple different ways. One is alignment around KPIs. So many companies, like, if you've got marketing looking at only inquiry to MQL conversion, that's awesome. That's a great metric to look at. But are they also thinking about conversion to SQL and to closed
Yeah.
won? And by the way, are they actually thinking about all the way through to churn? So they know the PPC ad that they just bought and how it churn, or what churn is or NRR is by PPC keyword, right? That's a whole different level of analytics that you're going to look at. So I think getting to a consistent set of metrics and cadence of reporting and reviewing is really critical. And that should be across, not siloed into, right? And so one of the meetings I always talk about is this pipeline meeting, where it's just historically a conflict-ridden zone, right? Where it's always
Yeah.
marketing, hey, the pipe is awesome. Sales, no, it's not enough, and it's not very good. And why don't you follow up faster? Like, it's a tale as old as time. But getting in a meeting like that and delivering the core KPIs of what does success look like, and then really starting to ask three questions: what happened? Why did it happen? And what are you doing about it? really salient questions to start driving an action-oriented meeting. Very analytical because you're looking back to see what happened and understanding why. But more importantly, what are you going to go do about it? And celebrating experimentation. So it's okay, right? If you did something, if you bid on a new set of keywords that last week you thought would work and this week isn't, that's cool. That's fine.
Yeah.
And don't let it go for 6 weeks until you raise your hand and say, oh, that didn't work. Do it 1 week, try it. And if it doesn't work, go adjust. That's great.
Yeah, I love that. It's an action-oriented culture that you build by doing that. But like you said, celebrate the things that you learn, which means you're not going to bat 1,000, right? Like no one is. You're going to try some things that will not work, and that should be celebrated because you learned what doesn't work. But if you, like you said, if you keep the conflict-ridden zone, and that's like the norm, right? Like then you're going to come into these and you're not going to want to share any of the stuff that didn't work because that's just going to be fodder for everyone else to pile on. So no, that makes tons of sense. So we talked a little bit about KPIs and meetings, and I think going across the silos as well. What are some other areas before we get into some of the challenges or mistakes? What are some other areas that again are typically ripe for opportunity where RevOps can make a big impact, or I'll say an outsized impact by making some of these like small tweaks within the go-to-market motion or model?
Yeah, I'd say defining and aligning the ICP. That's another really core one where you get maybe marketing chasing one ICP and you get CS telling you or implementation telling you, look, I can't do that. Like I can't service that persona or that company that you just said you know what we could do. And so tightening up on that, inspecting messaging all the way through that, looking at the cadences that the BDRs and AEs are using. There is a lot of room at most companies in really seeing that through.
Yeah. So a lot of what you're talking about, like with the ICP and even the KPIs and analytics, right? It's about connecting the dots between these different departments. Makes complete sense. Execution is always hard, right? So even like what you mentioned before of like, hey, I want the marketing team to understand the NRR and churn impact for every new customer that they get for pay-per-click specific keywords.
Yeah.
Right? I would love that. That sounds, but I know what it takes to try to actually be able to like measure that, which is really hard. So how do you do that? If you're living in this siloed world today where marketing is only looking at inquiry to MQL and they're not looking at anything outside of that zone, and you want to get them to the point where they can know NRR and churn for every new lead that comes in the door, where do you start? What do you do?
And the NRR by keyword's an extreme example, right?
Oh yeah.
But I use it because it is so extreme.
Yeah.
I
But
think
something to strive for.
It is, right? And so I think it's just asking those questions. Like many times what I found is leaders want to be able to have that visibility and impact and influence. A lot of times they're just so focused on day-to-day execution that it's a little tough to pull back. So a lot of times if we go into a meeting and you've got the CRO, CMO, and CCO sitting there, and the marketing individual is talking about, hey, let me tell you about the top level keywords. Many times what I'll just ask is like, oh, okay, help me understand the downstream implications of you running this new ad. And immediately they're like, oh yeah, and they've got it, right? Like it's always, hey, I got this will happen. And then the sales leader, generally you'll see, okay, now that you know what marketing's doing, what do we feel like we need to do differently on the sales side? And all you're doing is just starting to connect the dots, right? And I think that is sometimes doesn't naturally happen, but a few questions, a few probing questions, leading questions, then ultimately get people to that level.
Yeah, I like that. It makes a lot of sense. So we talked about a couple of areas that are, again, ripe for opportunity for RevOps to make an outsized impact within the flywheel, specifically alignment around metrics, KPIs across the different teams, and helping to develop and kind of fine tune the ICP. We also talked about like you're going to try things, but they're not always going to work. So let's talk about some stuff maybe that you've experienced in the past that hasn't worked, doesn't work. What are maybe some of those, call them not mistakes, but like some of those things that whether you've seen them repeatedly happen or some easy pitfalls that people can potentially fall into that you know from past experience, like, hey, don't go there, don't do this instead. What are some of those common issues as folks might be looking at their flywheel that they could easily fall into?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the concept of alignment and then how you reward certain behaviors. So compensation, right? So, if you've got person A that's paid on X, Y, and Z, and person B then that ultimately is paid on ABC, and there is zero alignment between those two, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be misalignment because that first person is going to go chase something completely different than what the second person is expecting, right? And alignment is probably, I would say, the biggest thing from a RevOps perspective that you can start tightening up. And whether that's aligning on KPIs, whether that's aligning on ICP, whether that's aligning on systems and processes, that's probably the biggest thing from a RevOps perspective that you can do, in my opinion. The second thing I think is elevating the conversation. We all live in these worlds where today's modern just my hot take is today's modern executive is asked to span from strategic kind of vision and operating level down to tactical execution in any one given meeting. Like the individual has to have that framework in their bones. And so I think about the good CROs, CMOs, CCOs that I've worked with, and they've got that. They know the business inside out. They can go put fingers on a keyboard if needed, but they can also sit in a strategic meeting and execute and talk about the vision with the board. Like the ability for the conversation to pull up and operate above the fray is what I like to say is that is also highly critical, and not get hung up on some of the smaller pieces of the business or smaller friction points within the business, but really keep the top level in mind when they're having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that all makes a lot of sense as well. I even think just to a lot of the experiences that I've had that, like you said, span the whole spectrum from being strategic with investors or whoever it might be to, like you said, down to like the tactical hands on the keyboard sort of stuff, and having the ability or capability to do that doesn't mean that you should necessarily always be doing tactical things as a leader or executive, but you should certainly have the ability to do that
right.
and to lead that way. And the incentive piece as well makes a whole lot of sense. And like you said, I think that's a big place where RevOps can make a huge impact, because ultimately at the end of the day, like everyone at the company, every executive wants obviously the company to succeed, but they are going to prioritize the things that will be best for them and their paycheck and their team. So if you incentivize them and compensate them on one thing and incentivize and compensate another executive on a totally different thing, like you said, and there's no overlap or alignment in those things, then like you've incentivized them to chase different things, and they're going to do that to no fault of their own.
Yeah. And it's back to the alignment conversation, alignment of compensation, comp plans, and how people are incentivized. So, yeah, I think as a RevOps leader, having the ability to align all of those piece parts to drive that productivity is highly critical.
Yeah. So, kind of next question I have for you is outside of, we talked a little bit about challenges, opportunities within the flywheel. Question for you around AI and RevOps, or maybe the AI impact on the revenue flywheel as well. How are there any specific examples of how you have used or seen AI impact you as a revenue operator, or even the reverse? How have you as a revenue impact operator impacted any of the AI initiatives that might be going on at Island today?
Yeah. I think we're probably impacting AI every day without knowing it. We are impacting and informing some model. I will tell you the part of, I think AI right now is at this space where there is a lot of interesting development happening. There are a lot of companies that are going 100% all in on AI and trying to figure it out. And then you've got this host of other companies that are trying to figure out the application of AI in a very responsible way. And I think the good ones are going to lean into AI and really start figuring out, okay, here's how I can apply it and drive some efficiencies through the go-to-market system. I was having a conversation the other day, and we were on a call with a CEO founder of an AI company, and it was 10 executives that, it was kind of a closed door session as she was unveiling her AI product. And yeah, I was just blown away with the level of sophistication, intelligence. I forgot the bot's name, but essentially it was a sales motion and it was an AI basically pitch person, right? And so they were going through discovery with us. They were asking fact finding information. You could weave in your sales methodology and teach her what type of sales methodology you lead or want. She was asking questions about the buying committee and pivoting off that, pulling up org charts, pre-built a proposal, put a soft close on it. It was a extremely cool and scary at the same time demo because she was doing it faster and probably better than I've seen most. And so it was something that you can see the world changing as that technology gets embraced.
Yeah. Follow-up question on that. I've seen or I've heard from a variety of different folks talk about the first wave of like AI applications in companies and then the second wave of companies that ultimately come. And some people are in like one of two camps. I've heard people say like, hey, there's no better time than the present. Like it's a land grab, go out, start testing, iterating, figuring something out. And if you're in this first wave of companies and you figure something out that works, like you'll have a humongous advantage. I've seen other people that have said, wait until the second wave. Let the first wave figure out the stuff that doesn't work, because there's going to be a way more higher amount of volume of stuff that doesn't work than does work, and then build and operate on that second wave. So as we look at things today, whether it's as consumers, buyers of products that have AI or are entirely AI driven, or revenue operators that are using these sorts of tools, or potentially people that are building in this space, do you think the first wave or the second wave is going to have more success?
Yeah, I'd say the first wave, I think, will have a lot of failure and will find one lightning rod, would be my thought. There's going to be something. I don't know what it is, but there's going to be something in there, and it's going to pivot whatever companies are trying to leverage that significantly ahead of that second wave. The safer play is obviously the second wave, right? And then they'll start riding those. But the companies that hit on that one lightning rod, that one feature functionality, one vertical that hits from an AI perspective, I think is going to be just through the roof and embraced everywhere. It's a little tough for me to, I generally am a conservative individual. So it's a little tough for me to go all in on. So, I mean, like you've seen AI around the BDR, SDR space, right?
Yeah.
You saw a lot of hype around that early on where, hey, the BDR is dead. Like AI is going to replace it. Now you've seen that pull back a little bit. So that obviously wasn't the lightning rod.
Yeah.
There's going to be one. I wonder if data and kind of large amounts of unstructured data to finite points could be something where AI really leverages. And that's more just harnessing the power of calculations and structuring all that. But I don't know where it's going to be. I have seen a couple false starts.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as operators, I know I've heard from other people out there who, some people are like, hey, I feel like I'm either missing the boat or I'm behind because like maybe we're not using AI as much as it sounds like we should be based on what we're hearing in the market. And what I typically tell those people, because what I think is in line with what you mentioned, which is, hey, like, first, always start with the problem, right? What problem are you trying to solve goes back to the kind of the framework of the what, why, and what are you going to do about it that you mentioned earlier, of like, start with the problem, not the solution. And I feel like that's the first thing that a lot of people have backwards. So as a revenue operator, don't go into this being like, I need to figure out where I can apply AI, right? Like that's not your starting point. Start with the problems that you're looking to solve for, the pieces of the flywheel where you can make a small tweak and have an outsized impact. Right. And then when it comes to solutions, AI is one of those potential solutions in the mix. It is not the only thing, and it should not be the only thing that you look at, but it should certainly be in the mix. But I tell those people, don't feel like you're behind or missing the boat on things because, again, like it's just really loud. There's a lot of noise out there. And to your point, like things are going to ebb and flow. And so, like, start with problems that you're trying to solve for and like fix those. And if that's the mindset and framework you come into this with, you're not missing anything.
I love it. I always say like AI is not a blunt instrument, right? Like it's not an overarching solution that automatically you pop in and subscribe to this
Yeah.
one service or buy this one tech and all of a sudden you're doing AI, right?
Yeah.
And so it is a very, there needs to be a very intentional use case and a very deliberate outcome that you're looking for. And when used responsibly, I think it's right. I think it's
Yeah.
100% right.
Yeah. Agreed. One more question I have for you. You've obviously progressed and have advanced a lot in your career now, leading, well, you've led revenue operations, have been an SVP at a variety of different companies. So, for folks out there looking at their own career path and how they can continue to progress and be a RevOps or operations leader, what sort of advice or kind of feedback would you give to those people? I know, like you mentioned, you've been on the sales side, so you've held a bag, you've been responsible for selling. Is that something you feel is needed, not needed? What are those main skills that you think people need to make sure they have in order to progress and advance in their
I
operation?
don't know if it's necessarily needed. It's unique and it helps understand the other side. To me, it's the curiosity mixed with the intelligence, mixed with the emotional kind of IQ that allows people to be really effective from a RevOps perspective. The curiosity side is basic, right? Like it just really thinking about how you dissect a problem and basically back to those pivot points of being able to change a problem and leverage points. As I think about the emotional intelligence, you're dealing with people on the other side that many times have 50% of their commissions on the line.
Yeah.
And so coming in and wholesale sweeping and saying, okay, hey, you don't do this well, or you don't, you're dealing with, I mean, and the AE job is a really, really tough one. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of times people don't have an understanding and an appreciation from who's sitting across the desk from them. So someone that has the ability to do that. And then lastly is the intelligence, but just like lifelong learners, people that are always looking at, okay, how do I go out and get more information? You know, you may know a little bit, but I can promise you there are different ways of thinking about what you're trying to tackle. And going out and reaching out to those people, meeting them at different conferences, things like that, really show me like, okay, this is someone who's really going to work hard to learn and hone a skill set.
Yeah. And I second those things. I think the curiosity and the learning is the biggest thing. And I think that probably applies. I mean, definitely applies, especially applies to operations. I think can apply to really any role out there. It goes back to what we were mentioning before of like approach everything with the goal of learning something, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the goal of being right. Because again, you're never going to bat 1,000 in your lifetime on anything. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, don't, if you go into it with the right versus wrong mentality as a thing you're trying to solve for, then, you're gonna just try to push things in that direction to generate that outcome. But if you approach everything with that middle ground mindset of like, hey, what am I gonna learn from this? What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this
Yeah.
person?
Yeah.
Like that'll serve you well. So
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. And one more question that's not RevOps or ops related before I let you run. We've talked a lot about the flywheel, operations, AI, your career outside of RevOps, outside of your role at Island. When Anil closes his laptop for the day, what do you do? What are you passionate about? What's one thing that you love to do that's not work or professional related?
Yeah. I love, love, love. Like the job is always so demanding, right? And
Yeah.
you're always on when you're in the office and having to make decisions. I love spending time with my family, and I basically just my wife tells me what to do. For those that know her, will understand, but my wife just tells me, "Hey, we're going here, we're going there," and I just love following along. I just good family time is always fun for me. I will tell you that I go to Home Depot, I don't know, 3 times a week. And I just like kind of goof around the aisles and check out things. And half the
Yeah.
time last week, I bought a drill that I didn't need. So I normally am messing around Home Depot as well.
Yeah, you got what home improvement project you got on the list right now?
Yeah, we actually just hung a TV in our son's room, and probably not a super intricate project, but finding the studs, making sure that you were right in the middle of the studs, and I was nervous. So it's been up like 3 days. No, it's been up a week now. So I was nervous like day
And it
one or
hasn't fallen
two.
down yet?
Yeah, it hadn't fallen. So I think we're good. I think we're in the clear, but we'll see.
Yeah. As someone who has mounted a TV in our living room, I can totally empathize with the sheer amount of pressure that is put on you in doing that because it's like you said, you got to find the studs and then you also got to measure correctly to just make sure that the frame and where the drill holes and stuff are actually lines up with what you're doing on the wall. And then there's always that moment where you like place the TV up there and then you hold your breath and you let it go and you're like, what's going to happen?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's no small feat. So I think that's something to be proud of for
I
sure.
will tell you, I do have cushions under the TV right now. So maybe this weekend we'll pull them away.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
Anil, thank you very much, my friend, for joining. Like I said, everything from the go-to-market flywheel, AI, career, and how to appropriately hang a TV in your son's room. So thank you, my friend. That's all I got for you, though, so I'll let you run.
yeah, it's awesome. Thank you for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Keep it RevopsAF.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevopsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.